Hi everyone, welcome to our third webinar, SAT/ACT Tips and Tricks. My name is Lauren Pang. I graduated from Branham in 2019 and I'm currently a rising sophomore at Georgetown University, and I'm planning on studying women and gender studies and justice and peace studies. Xiaomian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Xiaomian. I graduated from Branham this year, and I'm going to be attending Stanford this fall. I'm undeclared, but definitely going to be going to engineering.
Hi, I'm George. I graduated with Lauren 2019, and I'm go to UCLA, and I'm studying astrobiology.
So together, me, Xiaomian, and George all make up the Branham Alumni Network, and our goal is to help Branham students navigate the college applications process, which can be really challenging and difficult. And we're also working in partnership with Bruin to Bruin Tutoring Club, which is a student organization on campus. So to kick things off, we're going to start with a Kahoot, which is going to discuss some of the common misconceptions about the SAT and the ACT. Oh, I don't know how to click out. Oh, there you go. Oh, did I stop sharing my screen? I'm sorry. Now it's being weird. It canceled out of it for me. Do you guys have the presentation up?
Do you want me to share Kahoot?
Yeah, could you share the Kahoot? Sorry. I don't know
Yeah.
what's wrong with my computer.
Oops.
Oh, ignore the questions. You can click play as guest, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience. I don't know what happened. Everyone can sign up using this game.
Jamie, can you lower the volume on the sound button on the right?
No one has signed up yet. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Aryan. You want to start the Kahoot? And if anyone else wants to join throughout the thing, I think you can just jump in. Oh, I think the volume just cut out.
Oh, I stopped it.
Oh, okay, cool.
For you guys?
Yeah, I think we're ready to start.
Mm-hmm.
Xiaomian, can you press the start button?
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm like, okay.
Okay. And the answer is false. And we all got it correct. You do not need a perfect score to get into your dream college. I definitely did not get a perfect score, and I got into a college that was a perfect fit for me. And so, yeah, just try your best and you'll be fine. We can go to the next one. The next one, what is the national average SAT score? And, oh, it was between 1218 and 1059. But yeah, the national SAT score is 1059. And so you definitely do not need to get a perfect score, as this demonstrates. And what is the national average ACT score? And the ACT is out of 36. And yep, it's 21. So once again, you don't need to get a perfect score in order to get into a great school. True or false? I need to know calculus to do well on the SAT or ACT. And we almost all got it correct. The SAT and ACT is primarily IM2 and IM3 level math, and so you do not need to know calculus. True or false? The ACT is harder than the SAT. And we almost got it all correct. This is false. The ACT and the SAT are challenging in different ways. And so depending on the type of test taker or learner you are, one or the other might be a better fit for you. Which is a similarity between the SAT and ACT? This one's a little harder, so make sure to choose wisely. Oh, that's okay. We're going to go over this in detail later on in the webinar. But both the ACT have an optional essay portion, though this question was a little tricky because the essays are different. But yeah, all the rest of them are differences between the SAT and ACT. If I don't like my score, can I retake it? And if so, how many times? Yes, you can retake it 1 to 2 times. Technically, you can retake it an unlimited amount of times, but it looks kind of bad to colleges if you take the test more than 3 times. Typically, people take the test 1 to 3 times. Oh, and it's also important to note that each time you take the test, it's money and energy. So don't, you don't need to take it until you get a perfect score.
All three of us took it twice, though, so you won't be alone if you take it twice.
Super scoring is when you ... Oh, we almost all got that one right too. I thought that one was going to be tricky. So super scoring applies when you have when you take the test multiple times, and so then you can add your highest math score and then your highest ELA score together to get an overall higher score. But not all colleges have this option, so you just have to check with your university. And what George was saying before, all of us took the test 2 times, but it's up to you how many times you want to take it. Some schools have made SAT and ACT scores optional for admissions during COVID-19. True or false? We got it all correct. When SAT and ACT scores are optional, that's a test optional school. Also, some schools have become test blind, which means that even if you submit your SAT or ACT scores, they're not going to look at it at all. And then for some schools, this is a temporary transition, and for other schools, it's going to be a permanent transition. So if you're a freshman or sophomore, you might want to consider that. And I think the next question is our last one. I need to pay thousands in SAT and ACT tutoring to get a good score. And we almost got that one 100%. That is false. There are plenty of free SAT and ACT prep resources out there. And we also, Bruin to Bruin and BHS Alumni Network have a collection of lightly used prep books that you can borrow if cost is an issue for you. Also in this webinar, we're going to discuss different test taking strategies and study approaches. So if you can't afford a tutor, you're going to be just fine studying on your own. Okay. And next, oh, who won? Yay! Sure. And our winner is Lawrence. Awesome job, guys. Thank you, everyone, for participating in our Kahoot. I hope you had fun and learned something too. And I think now we're going to have George share his screen, and we're going to go on to the next part.
You can look at, listen, watch the webinar. Watch the webinar here.
Perfect. Okay. The first thing we want to cover today is just a little check-in. We do this weekly, and for this week's mental health tip, we want to talk about coping with test anxiety and fatigue. So this year is especially going to be stressful for juniors and seniors. You have a lot of tests you might be taking this year, not only SAT, but ACT and AP exams too. And so it's really important, even virtually, to hold yourselves accountable, and that can be through forming study groups with your friends and starting study sessions, starting early too, and creating or maintaining checkpoints across the year, marking down dates and spreading out your time in terms of studying so you don't have to cram at the very end or right during test season, and you will be overflooded with a lot of anxiety and, as a result, of course, fatigue. It's also really important as you pass each checkpoint to be proud of your progress. You guys are doing great work, and this time especially was so overwhelming for us. I can imagine like how it must be so hard now, especially with COVID. So definitely please be proud of yourself. Like, you guys are doing the impossible, and good on you. It's going to be an amazing year as long as like you keep that sort of mindset.
Next, we're going to be talking about our agenda for this webinar. First, we're going to start off with Ms. Perez's suggestions for seniors about whether or not they should take the SAT and ACT. Secondly, we'll be going over the differences between the SAT and ACT to help you decide which one is right for you. Then we're going to be going over what SAT 2 or SAT subject tests are and how to decide which ones to take. Then we'll be going over studying approaches and different test-taking strategies, depending on what grade level you'll be entering next year. And then fifth, George is going to go over some practice questions to help you see the mindset of a well-trained test taker. And then lastly, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. And so if you have a question throughout the webinar, or if we go too fast and you want clarification on a concept, definitely either DM Xiaomian in the Zoom group chat, or you can just publicly message us and we'll be answering those at the end.
So now, first we'll be going over some quick tips for seniors. So on whether to take or not take the SAT or ACT, and this is in reference to Ms. Perez's advice. So first of all, take a deep breath. Again, like what Kahoot has mentioned, many colleges change their application to be flexible to applicants. And in addition, less schools are considering SAT 2 exams, as well as test optional, test blind requirements. So don't stress about exams too much right now. And number 2 is work on your college application essays first, because they are a mandatory part of your application. Start early while you can and start brainstorming unique essays that represent who you are, and that is more important. And the third thing is prepare smart and less. So with that, what we mean is if you're prepared for the SAT, ACT, or any SAT 2 subject exams, or you want to take minimal time studying, you can definitely take the exam in the fall and sign up for them. Just keep in mind that whether the exams will still be offered in the fall is uncertain due to the surge of COVID-19 cases. However, of course, it doesn't hurt to sign up right now. And the next thing we suggest is check the test requirements of the schools that you are applying to, so that you take the exams that are required or recommended. Remember that the last date you can take the exam is usually the December date to send to colleges. And later on in the webinar, we will also be providing some tips for college application and submitting test scores. And so now we'll be going over some brief overview of SAT and ACT and some differences. On the Kahoot, I realized that a lot of you know what it is, so I'll just be going over them really quickly. Like what the Kahoot said, they have different portions of the exam sections as well as testing time. So, but in general, both exams test on English, reading comprehension, grammar, math, and writing. There are some differences though. One is the length of the test. So for example, with grammar, which is English in ACT and writing a language in SAT. The SAT gives you about 10 more seconds per problem than ACT. In addition, there are about half as many problems for this section in the SAT compared to the ACT. And so similar to grammar, ACT math and reading and essay is also much fast-paced. However, ACT is more straightforward in general. So to summarize, SAT gives you more time, ACT is more straightforward. And there are also some content differences. So to summarize, the biggest 3 differences are that SAT has a calculator and non-calculator math portion, while ACT has only one calculator allowed math section. But ACT does have a science section that tests on data analysis and critical thinking. Also, ACT asks you to write an argument essay, while SAT asks you to write a rhetorical analysis, which is an essay analyzing the writing devices an author used to accomplish his or her goal, and they're both optional. To find out which test suits you more, take both exams and diagnose whether you do better in the SAT or the ACT using a score conversion chart. This is the best method to find out which test you do better on. So now I'll be going over SAT 2 subject exams. Just a quick overview, SAT tests are 1 hour long multiple choice questions on specific subjects, which are listed to the right of the presentation. The score usually definitely ranges from 200 to 800, and to clarify, you do not need to answer every single question correctly to get an 800. In one sitting, a student can take up to 3 exams. Note that AP exams are different from SAT subject tests in content and length, and neither is harder than the other. However, taking the AP exam for the subject you want to take the SAT-2 test on definitely helps. And in general, students choose to take the AP exams in May and the SAT-2 subject test in June, allowing for a month of extra studying to prepare for the SAT-2 exam. However, you can definitely take SAT-2 whenever you want and whenever you feel prepared. Lastly, it is optional to college applications, but SAT-2 subject test is also highly recommended by many schools. Do note that starting from this year, MIT, Caltech, and Harvey-Mudd College are no longer accepting SAT-2 subject exams, even if you submit them. And so if you're thinking about taking SAT-2 subject tests, we do have some recommendations on how you can select the subject test you take. First of all, I want to clarify that I will be talking about math and science subject tests together as STEM subjects. And English, history, and language, which is not shown here, will be collectively as humanities. First, we recommend taking the SAT Math 2 because it is generally recommended by many schools to show your math proficiency. No matter what grade you're in, if you finish IM3 STEM, pre-calculus, or grasp the concepts well, you can start taking the studying and taking the SAT Math 2. On a side note, we recommend Math 2 instead of Math 1 because Math 2 is favored by many colleges. And to clarify a misconception, Math 1 is not exactly easier than Math 2. Although Math 1 may cover less subjects, it goes far more in depth than Math 2. So the second subject test we recommend if you have time is, depending on your career interest, you can pick a STEM or humanities subjects test to take. Following that, pick a subject from the field opposite of your interest. For example, if you want to go into an engineering major or a math major, you might first take a science subject test and then a humanities subject test. And if you're interested in humanities, vice versa. So this is an overview of SAT, ACT, and SAT-2 subject tests. Check out the link I posted in the chat right now, which lists concept guides for ACT and SAT you want to know for the test, as well as some prep resources we recommend.
Next, we'll be going over how to study for the exam. First of all, we're going to talk about preparing if you're a freshman or sophomore. Although some people choose to take the SAT or ACT as an underclassman, many high school classes like AP Lang and IM3 provide you with knowledge and skills that's directly applicable to the ACT or SAT. So for that reason, we recommend that you take the SAT and ACT as a junior or senior. However, there are still steps that underclassmen can take to prepare for the exam in advance. First of all, read a lot and diversify your reading. Reading frequently will help you to develop reading comprehension skills and expansive vocabulary, and also help you learn how to read faster. And then diversifying your reading will prepare you for the different genres and time periods of the passages on the reading section. The SAT has reading passages from classic and contemporary literature, history, social science, and science. And the ACT also has lots of different genres and time periods. So make sure you're reading lots of different sources in your free time. Our second tip is to strengthen your math skills in pre-calculus and IM2 and 3 concepts. All of the concepts covered in the SAT and ACT will be concepts that you discussed in your freshman and sophomore math classes. So, to make your life easier as a junior, make sure you develop an understanding of every math concept that you discuss in class. And make sure you're not just memorizing formulas and steps, but you're really taking time to understand why those formulas and steps work. And if you're confused, make sure you ask for help. That way, as a junior, you can skip the reviewing math step and go straight to learning test-taking strategies. Our third tip is to take the PSAT and AP exams. The PSAT is a shortened version of the SAT, and many people use that as a diagnostic to identify your strengths and weaknesses. Branham offers a free PSAT exam for sophomores, and you can also take it as a junior if you pay a fee. We also recommend taking AP courses, which help you learn studying techniques and also test taking and anxiety management strategies that will help you on the ACT and SAT exams. And our fourth tip is to get the SAT-2 test out of the way if you can. Junior year, you're going to be likely swamped with SAT studying, APs, and extracurriculars. So if you can knock out your SAT-2 test early, make sure to do that. As a sophomore, you might want to consider taking chemistry or world history. And if you're on an accelerated math track and finish IM3 early, you might want to start studying for the math test as well. And next, we're going to talk about preparing as a junior. Junior year is when you'll be likely doing a bulk of your SAT and ACT studying. So to have as stress-free of a junior year as possible, make sure that you create a plan and establish goals far in advance. That way you can manage your time wisely and make the most of each study session. On this slide, we'll talk about important aspects that we incorporated into our study plans. First of all, take a diagnostic to decide whether or not you want to take the SAT or the ACT. The PSAT is a great diagnostic because it's similar to the SAT. You can also find free SAT practice tests on the College Board website and free ACT tests at academy.act.org. And when you take the practice test, make sure you're being really serious about it. Sit down, time it, and pretend like it's the real thing. Then you can reflect on your experience and your score to try to figure out if you want to take the SAT, the ACT, or both. Once you've done that, you can start reviewing concepts that you haven't mastered. For this, you want to assess which areas that you want to focus on. You can either use the diagnostic data from your test, or you can look over our concept guides where we list every single concept that's covered on the SAT and the ACT, and we'll include that in our post-webinar resource email. Once you identify things you haven't mastered yet, head over to either Khan Academy or ACT Academy. They have a comprehensive list of videos and practice questions that will really help you to master these concepts. And then the third step is to take lots of practice tests. Most people aren't struggling on the concepts necessarily, but on the wording. A lot of the times, the SAT and ACT use weird phrasing that makes it difficult to identify what concept it's trying to test you on. Luckily, the SAT and ACT wrote the questions based off of specific rules and patterns. So if you take the practice test, you can become familiar with the phrasing, and eventually you'll increase your speed and accuracy. However, we just want to put in a disclaimer that the type of practice tests you take matters. Prep companies like Barron's and Kaplan oftentimes include practice tests in their prep books. However, those often break the rules of the SAT and ACT and test you on concepts that aren't even included on the test. So in order to learn the algorithm of the SAT and ACT and develop really good test-taking strategies, you're going to want to work primarily with the official College Board and ACT practice tests. And those can be found either on their website or in their official prep books. So also make sure to take the full practice test and time yourself, like I said before, because that will really increase your speed and your stamina, which is often a really hard part about the SAT and ACT as well. Now, our last tip is to really reflect on your practice tests after you take them. You want to review every question, not just the ones you got wrong, and you'll consider 3 questions. First, why the correct answer is correct. Second, why the test takers included each of these wrong answers. What were they trying to trick you on? And the third one is there a faster way that you could have gotten to the answer? It should typically take you 30 seconds to assess what type of methods that you'll be using to solve the question. And so try and figure out how could I solve this question faster will help you with speed, because that's a huge portion of the test. And I pulled this strategy directly from Mike Barrett's SAT and ACT Black Book. The Black Book is my personal favorite for test-taking strategies. It provides in-depth analyses of each answer on the official SAT and ACT practice tests, and also provides walkthroughs of the thought process that skilled test takers use when looking at the question. So even if you don't have the book, though, you can still undertake this process on your own. By reviewing the practice tests in this manner and asking these questions, you'll really increase your understanding of the SAT and ACT and your score. Next, we'll be going over how to prepare as a senior. Seniors taking the SAT and ACT in the fall will have to integrate their application process with their studying plan. Both can be really time-consuming and exhausting, so time management is going to be your best friend in this situation. It's going to be crucial to your success and your mental well-being. Our first tip is super scoring. Seniors who took the SAT and ACT as juniors might want to consider retaking it in the fall if they're unhappy with their score. Even if you don't get a higher score the second time, you may benefit from super scoring, which is what we talked about in the Kahoot. But this can be expensive and time-consuming to retake the test. So you might want to focus on extracurriculars, classes, and applications, depending on your situation. And if you're a senior, make sure you take the SAT 6 weeks and the ACT 7 weeks before your application deadline, so you can send in your scores and not have to pay tons of money. Our second tip is finish your subject tests. If you're looking through your application list and you realize that a school that you are applying to requires or recommends subject tests that you haven't taken yet, make sure to take those. However, I go to Georgetown, and Georgetown recommends 3 subject tests, and I only took 2, and I got in fine. So if you can't take all of the subject tests that they recommend, it's okay. The third tip is to send in your scores to colleges. Before the application deadline, you're going to want to send in your scores. And we'll explain this process on the next slide because it's kind of confusing. But definitely make sure you send in your scores at least 2 weeks before the application deadline, or else it will be very expensive. And our fourth tip is a thing called self-reporting that I personally did not know about, but it would have saved me tons of money. So some schools, the deadline doesn't apply. So for Stanford and Santa Clara and other schools like them, instead of sending your scores before you send in your application, you're going to report your scores directly on the application. And then you only send in your scores if you decide to enroll in that institution. So definitely make sure if your schools allow you to self-report, because it's available at some schools and it'll save you tons of money. Okay, next we're going to talk about how to send in your SAT scores. And even if you're not a senior, definitely pay attention to this because it applies to everyone who's taking the SAT. So you're going to do this process on the College Board website, and there's 3 different methods that you can use. The first one is where you can send your scores to 4 colleges every time you register. This is the fastest method, and it's also completely free. And you can select the colleges that you want to send your scores to up to 9 days after the test. The only downside about this option is that you can't take advantage of the SAT score choice policy. So your results will be automatically sent to those colleges, even if you do worse than you were expecting to. So we recommend only using option 1 for colleges that require you to send in all of your scores. And then after the 9-day window, you'll be doing option 2, and there's a fee, so $12 per college. However, some people are eligible for fee waivers, and so you don't have to pay this fee. And then option 2 allows you to use score choice, and so you can look at your scores and then selectively choose to send them to colleges if you did well, or you can retake. And then the third option is if you're applying to school last minute and the deadline is less than 10 days away. Then you can request to SAT rush order. However, that can be extremely expensive. If you're applying to 10 schools, it's going to cost you $310 in fees if you can't get a fee waiver. So make sure that you create your application list in advance so you can use option 1 or 2. And also make sure that you check if there's a self-reporting option, because then you don't have to go through this process for those specific schools. And then we'll also explain the next slide is about how to send your scores for the ACT. You're going to do this on your ACT web account. And since it's similar to the SAT, we're not going to review the details of the slide. But if you are taking the ACT, make sure to take a picture because there's slight differences between the SAT and the ACT sending in your scores policy. And I think we can move on to the next slide. And then finally, we're going to go over general tips and test-taking strategies that helped us survive our studying process. Before we get started, I want to put out there that every question has a definite answer. On the reading section in particular, they use really tricky language like most nearly means and which answer provides the best evidence. But there's always going to be one answer that's objectively correct and all the other answers are wrong. So make sure you're not interpreting the text like you do in English class. There's one right answer and it's going to be directly stated in the passage as long as you're reading closely. So definitely remember that. And then number 1 of our tips is work with the official SAT and ACT practice tests. That's the only way you're going to be able to learn the algorithm and develop really good test-taking strategies. Number 2, we recommend you take AP Lang as a junior. AP Lang is short for AP English and Language Composition. In that class, you'll be learning how to write rhetorical analysis essays and argumentative essays, which will really help you on the essay portion of the ACT and SAT. Also, the multiple choice questions on the AP Lang test are very similar to the nonfiction reading passages on the SAT and ACT. And in many of your freshman and sophomore classes, you focus mostly on fictional passages, and so learning how to work with nonfiction passages will be really helpful. So take AP Lang for that. Also in AP Lang, you review grammar techniques and vocab that will help you on the grammar and writing portions of the SAT and ACT. Our third tip is you might want to consider studying for the SAT math subject test with the general SAT math section. The SAT math subject test includes some concepts that aren't on the SAT, so it's a little harder concept-wise, but in general, there are a lot of concepts that overlap and are included on both tests, so you might be able to save some time reviewing those together. And our last tip is take care of yourself mentally. Studying for these tests can be extremely, extremely stressful. I remember I would have mental breakdowns trying to study because I was so stressed out. But when you're getting overwhelmed, feel free to take a break and remember to breathe. And regardless of your score, you are an incredible human being with boundless potential. And you're still going to get into an amazing college that's the perfect fit for you and have a successful career and a happy life, even if you don't get the SAT or ACT score that you wanted. And we're also here to support you. If you're struggling with academic concepts, hit up Bruin to Bruin tutoring services. You can sign up at Bruin, and then the number 2, Bruin at Weebly.com. They're incredible. We love them. Also, if you need help creating a study guide, finding studying resources, or brainstorming strategies to increase your score, you can either email us at branhamalumninetwork@gmail.com, or you can sign up for our individual tutoring services, and we'll have the sign-up form later on in the webinar. But yeah, we're here to support you. We love you. You're going to be okay.
Now we're going to enter the practice questions section of this webinar. So we're just going to go through 4 questions. 3 of them are from the SAT, reading, grammar, and then math respectively. And the 4th one will be an ACT science question. So these questions are just to help you. I'll be giving you just enough time, the average time you get per question. I'll read out the question first and then let you have the time to process the question and pick the answer that you believe is best. And then we'll go through it and I'll explain why the correct answer is correct and why the 3 wrong answer choices were wrong. And I'll do it in a bit of a meta way. So like I'll explain to you the sort of patterns that you might be able to notice, process of elimination, and give you a few tips. This is just to help you, so don't freak out. Like this isn't going to determine your SAT score if you don't get one of them right. So just process. The first question we'll be doing is SAT reading, and you'll have 1 minute and 15 seconds. So we're going to start. I'll put on a timer, but first I'll just show you the passages and the question involved. Okay, so as used in line 1 and line 65, directly most nearly means, and you have 1 minute and 15 seconds that starts now. You have 30 seconds left. Okay, you can stop now. So this question, I believe, is actually the first question on the SAT reading section of the first practice test on the College Board SAT website. And so what you would look like if you were just to open your packet in the beginning of an SAT would be this. And the first question would be, as used in line 1 and line 65, directly most nearly means. And my recommended strategy, and I picked out the passages, the lines here for you, would to actually be to read the question first, not the passage, so that you can go back and not be overwhelmed and swamped by all the material. You can come with a fresh perspective, especially for this. This question here is testing your vocab specifically. And so the rest of the passage might change the answer in your head or be something that sort of twists it in your mind. So now we're going to go through it. The tip that I want to really emphasize is of course, read the questions before passages and also to read in context. So here, I also have the passage in context a bit. So not only just like the word directly, and then I have what's around it. So here explicitly, I'll read out the first line, and I want you guys to notice a sort of pattern here. Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father, to approach a go-between? Would she have been more receptive? And then line 65 is, I asked directly because the use of a go-between takes much time. And here, the commonality between these 2 lines is talking about a go-between. And in context, they're talking about a lack of a go-between. And a go-between is a sort of mediator. And when they're talking about it, they're talking about it as if there's a lack of a mediator. And like Lauren mentioned before, here in context, in the passage, you already have written out without mediation. So that should stick out to you immediately. And without even looking at the other answer choices, you can tell that the answer to this question will be without mediation. Directly here is talking about breaking tradition and going against the context. And here that means without mediation. Frankly, is a synonym technically of directly, but it's not stated in the passage at all. There's nothing really about being honest, which is what frankly is. So that version of directly isn't here. Similarly with confidently, confidence can be associated with directness, and it might be implied here, but there's nothing explicitly about being confident. So once again, there's nothing in the passage about being confident. And there is something in the passage about without mediation, the use of the go-between and the lack of it. So that should tell you immediately that that's the correct answer choice. And the last one, with precision, that's barely relevant here. That usually they try to throw you off about what the definition is of directly at all. So that that's not used here in context at all. It's not written in the passage, so you can ignore that completely. Also, if you have any questions during this, type it in the chat or directly to Zhao Mian, and she'll let me know, and I can reiterate anything if you guys are confused at all. The next question we'll be facing is from SAT Grammar. You have only 47 seconds, so it's quite a bit less. And I'll read the question out first, and then you can begin. After reading each passage, choose the answer to each question that most effectively improves the quality of writing in the passage, or that makes the passage conform to the conventions of standard written English. Many questions include a no change option. Here it's option A. Choose that option if you think the best choice is to leave the relevant portion of the passage as it is. So basically here, you're gonna read the first passage and choose whether or not to replace the underlined word. You have 47 seconds, you may begin. You have 15 left. Seconds. Okay. Please stop. So within the passage, when we look at the verb outdo, in context, it's comparing the many healthy benefits or advantages of Greek yogurt and the potential drawbacks. That's all we need to focus on here. And the comparison of those two concepts, advantages and drawbacks, are being, we're trying to figure out what's the best verb to compare them. So when you're comparing advantages and drawbacks, it's a positive and negative contrast. So a word like outdo doesn't really make sense, because when you think about outdo, it's like if you're in a competition, if there's like two runners in a marathon and they're trying to outdo each other. An advantage can't really outdo a drawback or a disadvantage because one is positive and one is negative. They're innately different. So that immediately eliminates outdo, defeat, and outperform. Those are all positive contrasts. They have to do with something beating each other. Outweigh is something that we use when we talk about like something being negative and something being positive, like the benefit outweighs the risk. So here, outweigh is the best option. So that's what you would use. And clearly here, outdo, defeat, and outperform are all positive. They're all synonyms of each other. And even if you didn't know for sure which one to use, but you notice that those three are all synonyms of each other, and outweigh is completely different as a verb, you could use process of elimination, and that would be the most likely option. Obviously, that's not necessarily the best strategy you always want to maintain, but that can be that can make or break your indecision about a score. And with the time limit, it's really just it's best to get through all the questions and then go back if you have any concerns. We're going to proceed to the math section, and this is no calculator. You are going to have 1 minute and 15 seconds. I'll read the question out first. For I equals square root of -1, what is the sum, parentheses 7 plus 3i, plus -8 plus 9i? And you have 1 minute and 15 seconds, and you may begin. And now you have 30 seconds left. And please stop. So SAT math is especially where they're definitely going to try to trick you. Usually you also want to save most of your time for the last few questions because those will be the most complicated ones. But when you're going through, they're really going to try to trick you by just like a common math error. And that's what all of these answer choices involve. So this does test your knowledge of imaginary numbers, but really you don't need to know them because if you just treat I like X, you should be able to solve this math equation just fine. So here we're going to add the common terms, so like 7 and -8, and then 3i and 9i. And 7 plus -8 is -1. So we immediately can tell that the answer will be either A or B. C and D are immediately eliminated. Those answer options were trying to trick you. And like if you saw 7 plus 8, then you would choose the 15s. And then when we add 3i and 9i, that gets 12i. So the answer is A, -1 plus 12i. And if you accidentally said 3i minus 9i, then you would get -6i, and that would be answer B or C. So really, math questions are pretty simple. You just have to make sure that you read the entire question and carefully, and you can use process of elimination to make sure. You have quite some time for the math no calculator section. So definitely make sure you're reading the entire question well and carefully and that you don't miss anything because those tricks will definitely affect you if you let them. And now finally, we're gonna go to an ACT science question. You're gonna have 52 seconds. And these science questions look like passages. And the question is, based on the information in scientist one's view, which of the following materials must be present on Europa if a magnetic field is to be generated on Europa? 52 seconds, you may begin. And you have 15 seconds left. Okay, please stop. So similarly to the SAT reading, it might look like a huge passage, but like the tip here said that I added, all you need to do is find magnetic field. That's what the question's asking you. And that is literally just this part, this section of the passage, Jupiter's magnetic field. So in the beginning, similar to SAT, you're gonna wanna just read the questions first and then focus in on those parts of the passage where they use those words. You don't really need to read the entire passage that much. That might just take up a lot of your time, especially on the ACT where time may be a conflict. So the sentence here that's important says, Jupiter's magnetic field sweeping past Europa would interact with a salty, deep ocean and produce a second magnetic field around Europa. The spacecraft has found evidence of this second magnetic field. So immediately we know that this has something to do with a salty, deep ocean, nothing to do with frozen nitrogen or water or molten magma. Those options are immediately eliminated because they're not in the text. So it has to do something with either water ice or dissolved salts. Here you might then of course need some science knowledge to know that salt is composed of ions, so those produce a magnetic field. Or just from reading, it distinguishes the ocean by calling it salty, deep ocean, so that will distinguish it from water ice. So that kind of shows you that you don't need to be like an expert in science. Just from reading alone, you can make the the distinct assumption that it is going to have to do with salts rather than just water. So thank you for participating. I just want to cover some major takeaways again. Please know how to do the exam content firsthand before you try to dive in and think about the patterns and memorizing like what kind of questions are each SAT question. You really need to know, like for example, the math curriculum. Process of elimination might help you, but really like you should know the IM2 and IM3 content relatively well. Then you should begin to learn the patterns of the test, like avoiding distractors, reading questions first, then passages. Of course, if you want to read the passages first and that fits you better, you can do that too. Don't focus on any extra info if the question is specific. And when it asks you about a line, make sure to read the line in context because context can help. And to reiterate what Lauren said, everything is directly stated in the text, not up to your interpretation. And finally, I wanted to talk about Bruin to Bruin Tutoring is going to release an SAT guided video for you. So if you want to take a practice SAT or a diagnostic, they're going to release the video around Friday night on their website, and we'll also lead you to a link on the post-webinar email. So if you want to sort of emulate that sort of simulate the sort of environment, you're completely able to. We recommend you start at 8 a.m. On Saturdays, sort of like mimic the exact environment that you would when you would actually take the SAT. And finally, Lauren and Xiaomin and Bruin to Bruin Tutoring also compiled this huge prep resource guide for SAT and ACT, so please make sure to check it out. It's in the guide attached. I think there's a few links that we'll drop right now in the Zoom, and it's also going to be in the post-webinar chat. So please make sure to check it out. It's really helpful and has a lot of resources. And also, the book drive that we had on Wednesday went really well. We got over 50 books, so thank you for coming out so much. And so now feel free, you can also access this sort of online library that shows you the titles of the books, and you should be able to access it on the Bruin to Bruin Tutoring website. And if you want to donate, please contact us, or if you want to pick up a book, also please contact us. You should be able to through the website, and we'll try to connect you as soon as possible. You might have to travel to pick up the book though, but we'll figure out those details with you one-on-one.
We also want to tell you about our next webinar coming up on Wednesday, August 5th. We're going to be going over how to write a college essay and help you to kind of brainstorm what you might want to write your college essays on. So definitely join us. And to sign up for it, you can use the tinyurl.com/bhsalum0805. Also, if you want to sign up for individual tutoring services, definitely make sure to fill out the tinyurl.com/bhsalumtutoring, and we'll set you up with a personalized tutor that will help you to work on anything you want.
And there's no colon in the URL.
Oh,
I
yeah.
sent it in the chat, yeah.
And also, if you didn't fill out the RSVP form before coming to this webinar, definitely make sure to leave your email in the chat or message us privately, and so we can add you so you can get all of these links in our post-webinar email.
So we have several questions that came up. The first question is, how many subject tests did we take? For me, I took 4, but I only sent in 3, so the extra one was definitely not necessary. I took math, SAT chemistry, and SAT US history.
Yeah, I took math 2 and then US history.
I took math 2, biomolecular. I actually took it twice because the percent didn't go so high, and then US history. And I also wanted to mention, if you take AP Bio, it won't necessarily prepare you for biomolecular or bioecological. A lot of those questions are very like detail oriented, and that's what really separates AP and SAT 2 subject tests. Those are a lot more detail memorization oriented, not sort of like concept and holistic understanding. But the US history one is definitely kind of similar in sort of like reading passages. So yeah, make sure like to buy separate prep books or study separately. For those, don't think that just because you took the AP exams, you'll be already for the SAT 2-subject test.
Yeah, and also sometimes people who didn't take the AP exam might have a leg up on the people who took the AP exam, because people in like normal history oftentimes focus on more details, and so they actually might be better prepared than people in AP classes. So definitely, if you didn't take an AP exam, don't be afraid to take the subject test.
And then our next question is, why should we pick an SAT subject test that is opposite to our major, and how do we pick if we're not sure what our major will be? So the reason why we said picking a subject opposite of your major is because it shows that you're well-rounded. And this was the approach that I took, also what George took for taking SAT subject tests. I have friends who took the math exam and 2 science exams, so it is optional, and whatever works for you. If you're unsure about your major, you can choose to take the SAT subject test of what you took your AP exam on. So for example, if you want to knock out an exam in your sophomore year, you might take WAP and then take the SAT world history. But that's just an example. And then, yeah. Okay, and then, and yes, we'll be posting this webinar on the Bruin to Bruin site as well as on our YouTube account. And we'll send it out in our post email. Okay, our next question is, how should we select which 4 colleges to send our scores to? I believe this is for when you are finished taking your SAT without knowing your score, that you're sending your scores to 4 schools. You can send your scores to the colleges you're considering that requires you to send all the SAT exams, such as Carnegie Mellon and Rice. And remember, you have self-reporting too, so you don't have to send scores spending money on them. Instead, you can just put your scores in the application, but make sure you're truthful, because they do like check your scores with your actual score report when you're choosing to enroll in the school. And then our next question is, are there any programs or tutors you recommend for the SAT or ACT? First of all, we definitely recommend the Black Book, which we mentioned several times throughout the webinar. If you have trouble buying the book, please let us know and we will help you. And then we don't recommend big classroom boot camps unless, of course, they receive really good rating, because these boot camps usually focus on a class, so you might not be able to receive individual help. We don't have any recommendations for specific organizations, but if you're trying to find tutors, finding people who can give you one-on-one tutoring is usually more helpful.
Yeah, and I personally used AJ tutoring, and they helped me, but everyone is different, so it really depends on you and what sort of help you need.
And then, how long are the reading passages, and how much time should you spend reading each passage? I believe for the SAT, they give you about 13 minutes per passage, while on the ACT, they give you about 8 minutes per passage. So I had people who told me that you can spend like 6 minutes reading the passage and get it really well known before you tackle the questions, and then answer the question in like 2 or 3 minutes. So it really depends on you. And I have people who like didn't read the passage at all and go to the questions and then go back to the passage when they see questions with specific lines. So it depends on you, but you can definitely refer to the Black Book, which they give you several strategies on how you can approach, which is first read passage, then read questions, or first read questions, then read passage, or briefly overview the passage before you tackle the questions. So take practice tests to see which one works best for you, and always like be flexible on how you approach them, because you never know if you end up finding a better strategy for you.
Yeah, and then for me personally, I really struggled with timing. Sometimes I would take the test and I'd spend so much time reading the passage that I'd miss like a whole entire passage at the end and run out of time, which is really bad, and my score wouldn't be very good. And so what I found is I actually would write the times that, like, every 13 minutes I'd write at the very beginning of the test, I'd write down when I need to move on to the next passage. And so I could keep myself going fast.
And yeah, that's all the questions. If you have any more, send us to us. But yeah, thank you for coming to our webinar today. We will see you sometimes later.
We also wanted to thank Miss Morella and Miss Perez for attending. They are really, really helpful to Branham students and how to navigate the college applications process. So a huge shout out to them.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I have to go too. Sorry, guys. I'm
Okay, bye, George.
But bye. Thank you so much, everyone.